Okay, I think we can start. Now today I'm planning to do two things. One of them is go over certain material that we covered on yesterday actually. And at the same time, this is hopefully going to give you more idea about certain concepts like decisions, performance measures, how to measure those performance. And then after that, I would like to solve an example, which will be very similar example to typical questions that you might get. And then we're going to do some discussion. And in the second hour after the break, we're going to have the quiz. So that's more or less the plan. Now, this part of the course, I admit that it's not going to be simple and straightforward to understand, this week's course. Because basically we're talking about certain concepts that are abstract, but at the same time, at the end of 4 years, you will have to find a way to boil down those abstract things into practicality. Okay? So in that respect, and it's still too early to mention those, but I think it's time to talk about those, the distinctions, and I will try to wrap up at the end in terms of what I'm expecting you to do, at least in this course, but in general as well. So what I will do now is I will try to give a definition of decision today, and then we're going to relate that to performance measure. So we have been talking about decision. Decision is a daily word that we use. However, in the context that we're talking about, it will be a little bit more structured. So let me write that. So decision is actually an input over which the decision maker has control in the form of. Now we're going to have several different forms, but basically what we're talking about is we're talking about a decision maker. Decision maker is actually the person who is going to make the decision. It can be a committee rather than a single person, but the idea is whether it's a single person or a group of people, we're talking about an input that they are going to make, and this input can be in one of the following forms. And as you are going to see later on, not later on, but in the coming semesters, we will be talking about in different courses, different types of decisions, and hopefully it will fit one of the forms that I will be describing here. Now, the first one is simply a single action. In other words, I'm asking you, are you willing to do this? You say yes or no. This is a single action. If you say yes, it means that you are going to take whatever necessary to do that, but that is a decision. So are you going to the movies tonight? The answer yes means that you will be going to the movies. So it might be a very simple action of this sort. Now, in industrial engineering, of course, we have a lot of decisions of this type. Okay? By the way, there will be no notes related to this. So I'm not going to rewrite this and distribute that to you. So you can only read that from the video, or you may need to write this. Okay, so this single action actually might be a complicated action, but still it is basically a very simple idea. For example, I am a certain manufacturer, and I am going to decide whether I'm going to manufacture part A in my factory or buy it from somebody else. This is called make or buy decision. Either I'm going to manufacture it at home, or I'm going to buy it from somebody else. So this is actually a single action. Now, this does not necessarily mean that it's a simple action, but it's a single action, and we call this a decision. So some of the decisions that you are going to see will be in this form. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay. Now, number two, we might be setting a group of values and or assignments. So, for example, in the course production planning, you're going to learn there is a facility here. So we have a number of machines, and then we are going to have a production plan, which is going to say that this week, from product 1, I'm going to produce 13 units. Product 2, I'm going to produce 15 units. Product 3, I'm going to produce 16 units. And worker A will be assigned here, worker B will be assigned here, worker C will be assigned here, and there might be some other decisions as well. This is called a production plan. You plan actually the production facility, and then your decision is going to be in the form of setting all these decisions at the same time. Okay? So it is not, again, as simple as describing a single action, but still it can be defined. So any plan that you are going to implement actually turns out to be a possibility. Okay, you can pass to this side as well. Okay, so this is number 2. Now, number 3, on the other hand, is another type of decision that we are going to confront in some other courses. This is called rules. So you're going to have a set of rules that you apply when something happens. So this is called rules, or sometimes control mechanism. And what you have is you have probably a set of rules that describes what you are going to do. For example, if X occurs, then take action Y. If T occurs, take action something else. Now, this action might be a single action or a group of actions. But basically what you do is this is a function of what is occurring. So it's a function of something that you are going to observe as time evolves. And then you're going to decide accordingly. Just a simple example. Let's consider a newsstand early in the morning. Okay? So we have new tapes coming out every night. So the headlines of the newspaper is so attractive that people finish the number of newspapers that were available in the morning, early in the morning at 8:15. So what the guy is going to do will be simply actually call the distributor and ask for more newspapers. Now, this rule might be, if it is earlier than 10 o'clock, call and order. If it is later than 10 o'clock, do not call. Because if it is later than 10 o'clock when all the newspapers are finished, then you know that you are not going to have a lot of people coming in and buying. But if it is early in the morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning, you might want to order again and bring more newspapers in the hope that you will be able to sell them. Now, of course, this example is very simplistic, but the way that we are going to decide on that X and Y, or the set of X's and the set of Y's that will correspond to each other, is actually a decision. But you can see that this is in a different format than what we had here, or what we had here. Okay? It's based on some information coming in, and you simply react to that information. Now, you're going to see that, for example, if you are going to solve certain problems that contain uncertainty. Uncertainty means that we don't know the future. We know the possibilities of what will happen in the future, but we don't know which one will occur. We know actually the type of things that can happen, but we don't know which one will occur. In those cases, you have all these type of rules that you set up in order to make some decisions. So this is the way that it goes when you have uncertainty. Now, you're going to see in certain courses on typical decisions to make when you have something like this coming in. Okay? And we're going to see how we can obtain the set of rules that we are going to utilize. Okay? But this is also in the framework of a decision. Okay? Any questions on this? Now, we're going to have, probably this semester, we're going to have an example related to this one, if I am not mistaken. Let me see. Well, we'll see. I don't remember clearly. Okay. Now, number 4 is, which I am going to call it a policy. A decision might end up to be a certain policy that you apply. For example, this policy might be set of standards that you have when you are applying a certain decision. Just one example. Let's say that you are working for a carrier, airmail carrier, which has some decisions to make with respect to what should be the frequency of delivery. For example, if you pay a lot of money to a company called United Parcel Service, UPS, you might have a delivery which is guaranteed to be in 24 hours. Okay? Now, of course, the problem is, how did they set that 24 hours? Well, they have certain restrictions that goes together with it, but basically what they are proposing to the customer is either this policy or the other policy, which is decided by United Parcel Service, UPS firm. Now, why 24 hours but not 25? I know that the day's length is 24 hours, but why not 23 or why not 12? So if, for example, if I deliver something early in the morning, why not have the possibility of getting the other part getting it that evening? Why don't we have that? Well, we might have that, but basically policy is setting a set of standards that will tell you that these are the set of rules that you are going to obey regardless of what you observe. Now here it is a function of what we observe, and then we're going to actually react to that observation. If X occurs, we're going to do Y. So it means that if I am preparing for such a decision, what I will need to do is I will need to list all the possible X's and correspondingly all the possible actions that I'm going to take. So it's not a simple job to do that. Whereas here, you simply say that these are my standards. Whether you like it or not is your problem as a customer. And they come accordingly. Of course, when you are setting your standards, you have to make sure that you will be able to compete in the market. So if UPS says that I am going to deliver in 72 hours and I'm going to charge per milligram $2,000, then nobody is going to pay for that. So you have to make sure that you're going to have. But this is what we call a policy, and it's also a decision problem. When you look at from UPS side, it's a decision problem. Any questions on those? Now, again, as I said, these might be simple to understand in the beginning, but you're going to have some problems when you are constructing those type of things yourselves. But these are the typical decisions that you're going to be seeing in some other courses, where the courses will be oriented towards solving certain problems with these decision forms. Okay, fifth one. Now, another possibility for decision is we might setting amount of resources to be used. So that's another decision. Think about a restaurant where waiters and waitresses are serving. So when you decide the total number of waiters or waitresses, okay, then what you have been decided is a set of resources, and you think that they will be able to handle different groups of people, different crowds. Sometimes it will be empty, sometimes it will be very crowded, but you hope that they will be able to handle the customers who are coming in. So your decision is you set the amount of resources. Okay? In production planning, we're going to see, for example, when we are setting workers like this in restaurants, that's one type of a problem. Another typical problem is you have a very valuable machine which can be used to do either this or the other. And what you say is, I'm going to use 40% time of this machine for this job and 60% for the other. So that you actually specify it ahead of time, you allocate the resources. And that's a very important set of decisions. Okay, this is another type of form of decision that we might have. And finally, these are all operational level type decisions, operational or middle level. I will be talking about those later on. But we might have a major project, like the construction of the cafeteria that we have across, not across this building, but across the engineering building. Okay? And in that case, what we are doing is we are doing an investment. And while doing that investment, we are deciding on a number of things at the same time. For example, we are deciding on a set of standards. We are deciding on some resources that we are going to have, like the number of lines that you have and so on are resources actually. Or we are deciding on setting some group of values, like for example, when we are buying the stuff in the kitchen, you have to make a decision with respect to what to buy, the equipment and so on. So when you have an investment, you might need a combination of the above decisions to be made concurrently. Okay? So an investment might be for a building, an investment might be for an equipment, an investment might be for setting up a certain system where people are going to work. Okay? So this investment might be for a machine, for a building, or for any system where a lot of humans are involved, and this is basically what we are going to have. Now, the last one is a little bit more difficult than the others, because what you need to do is you need to think about a number of things in combination with each other. And hopefully, if you can give a solution to this problem in a reasonable way, I think there is a noise coming in. Am I right? Oh, okay. Okay. And so in that case, this is going to be a harder decision because you have to think about a number of things together. Now, it turns out that this is going to be a typical work that you're going to perform in your fourth-year project. Basically, what you are going to be asked will be maybe a simple problem, but it will have a number of sides. So it is like a system where you need to make a number of decisions concurrently, and then you propose the problem owner, the person who brought that problem to the attention of this group, in such a way that you are going to make sure that all the set of problems that you mentioned are approached in a certain way that you designed. This is called actually a design. You might call it a design at that point in time because you are preparing something from scratch. You are designing a system, or you are designing a building, or you are designing a machine, or whatever. Okay? So this is actually how we see decisions. So you can see that it is very important that we understand this together with the idea of performance measure. Because remember, up to this point, we discussed the idea of performance measure in an abstract way. We said that we have to make sure that we have to get some measurements in order to show, for example, the improvement that we made. Okay? So I think this is basically something that is going to close the envelope in the sense that we have to understand this. Okay, any questions on this? Now, let me go further. Now, we are talking about a decision maker or a group of decision makers, we said. Now, what we mean by a decision maker can be considered as the problem owner as well, in most of the cases. There are some subtle cases that is not going to fit this definition, but in most of the cases, what we are considering as the decision maker is the owner of the problem. And in real life, you're going to see that this is going to create a lot of problems with respect to who to listen to and for who is the real problem owner and so on and so forth. Think about a large corporation. Think about Google, for example. Now, in Google, you have a lot of decision makers at different levels. But eventually, if we're talking about a major decision, who should be giving that decision? The owner of Google should give the decision. Who is the owner of Google? Well, there is no single owner. There is a guy who has a lot of shares, but the owner is public. So people own shares there. So it turns out that certain problems that we approach are not as easy as it looks when you start looking at the decision maker. However, I'm going to make our life easy as industrial engineers. We are going to assume the problem owner as the person who brings the problem to us. So if we are working in an organization, then it means that we are talking about the manager of that organization, the CEO of that organization is basically the problem owner. That person might give authority to others with respect to certain decisions. Then in that case, of course, the problem owner will be those people who have the authority. Now, usually in organizations, you have a hierarchy where the authorities are given to different people with respect to different decisions. So problem owner in that respect is an important concept. Always remember the traffic example. You might approach the same problem from different views, and your approach, your design will be completely different. Okay, questions? Okay, so this actually wraps up the part that is related to decisions. Now, let me go over the performance idea, performance measure again. Now, let me specify performance measure or define performance measure again. But this time, I am going to use the word decision in the performance measures definition. So performance measure is basically an output used to measure the system performance. So I am calling anything that we have here as the system, okay, which requires actually more attention, but I am a little bit sloppy on the definition of the system. But you understand that it's the environment that you are operating in. And as a function of decision. Now, in other words, what I did now is I related the word performance measure with the decision. In other words, think about TOS Kaizen example. Now, the main reason that the guy selected time as the performance measure is that he knew that he would have some proposals which is going to change that performance measure value. Okay? So time in that respect is relevant because he knows that certain decisions that he is going to give is going to change the time. Now, what are the decisions that that person was giving? Basically, it is a procedure that he was deciding. So if you look at this, this is basically policy. He was deciding on the policy, how to do things. You have a certain policy. So basically, the first thing that is take out certain things from the refrigerator, put it close to where you are working. That's the policy. And then move the toaster to where you are working, so on and so forth. Okay, so they are the policies. So given those policies, that decision, which is in the form of a policy, you actually want to see the effect of that on a certain measure, and we call that measure, that metric, as the performance measure. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, finally, when we have once performance metric is set, measuring it is not always straightforward. Again, think about the Kaizen example. Now, measuring is straightforward there. If you have a watch with certain capability, like you have to be able to measure the seconds, yeah, and if somebody keeps up the watch there, you will be able to make a measurement. Of course, how many times should we measure? That's another thing. Maybe the guy is hurrying up in order to show that his decisions are very good. Okay, so we have to make sure that his pace is standard as well. He's not doing certain things faster than he used to do, just to show that his decisions are better. You're going to see this type of evaluation in 271. Okay, that's called rating. You rate the person who is doing that. But the idea is that I know what the performance metric that I'm going to use is, but how am I going to measure it is not that straightforward. Let me give an example, which is probably the worst possible example that I will be able to give in terms of difficulty, level of difficulty. This is the most difficult type of performance measure or measuring performance metric idea. This is the hardest that you can have in real systems. In real systems, what is the main performance measure of a corporation which is for profit? As the name implies, that corporation wants to increase their profits. Okay? So this is very simple. So performance measure, let's say that we have a performance measure which is profit. Now, of course, you're going to say that this is obvious because if we give a good service, we're going to have more customers coming in. So our profit will probably increase if the costs are not increasing like hell. Okay? So profit is a very good indicator that shows various sides of what you want to do. Service side, if your service is bad, you are not going to have a lot of customers, so your profit will go down. On the other hand, if your costs are high, if you are not efficient or effective, in both cases, your profits are going to go down. So you have to make sure that you are efficient, you are utilizing your resources in a nice way, and at the same time, you are effective. You are actually fulfilling the purpose of why you are there. Okay? So these are, I think, two issues that are extremely important. So profit seems to be what I should measure. However, in reality, on the other hand, how are you going to measure the profit of a certain company? Now, there are different ways of doing it. For example, we have something which is called tax. We pay income. Companies pay income taxes. There are certain expenses that you can show and you can reduce from the income tax that you are paying. So should we be interested in the income after tax? Should we be interested in income before tax? Because there are a number of things that you can do to increase or decrease that quantity. It has nothing to do with the efficiency or effectiveness of your operations. You can buy a car at the end of the year, and your profits are going to go down because of that. Okay? So question here is, how am I going to measure profit when I'm making a simple decision like production planning decision? Now, it turns out that although profit is the ultimate performance measure for most of the organizations that we will be working at, we might be working for different types of organizations, non-profit organizations, then of course profit is not going to be the ultimate thing to consider. But if we are considering for-profit organizations, measuring profit actually turns out to be practically impossible if you want to relate that to the decisions that you take for the operations. Okay? So what we do is we use different things. For example, we have profit, a notion called profit before taxes, or we have a notion that we call net profit, which is a little bit different than the others. There might be another notion which is called contribution. So instead of considering the profit that you obtain from the product, you assume that you have an organization which has a lot of fixed costs, like the salaries that you pay and so on and so forth are fixed because you cannot get rid of people every day or every month. So the question is, what is the contribution of my operation to the company as a whole might be a very good indicator of the profit. So question here is, measuring profit is more difficult than it looks. So what we are going to do, not only here, but in real life as well, is to create some proxies, some measures that will be representing the actual profit value as much as we can, of course. So there will be a number of alternatives to do that. So this is actually what we do in general, and we're going to see some examples. Every time that you do a model, you're going to see the examples of it. Of course, these are technical terms. These are terms that comes from what we call accounting. And for those of you who will be interested in those bunch of works, there are some elective courses available in the department. But basically, how we are going to measure is not very straightforward. Another thing is, of course, customer satisfaction. Now, we say that effectiveness is a function of customer satisfaction. If I satisfy customers, then those customers are going to come back to me again. How are we going to measure customer satisfaction? Okay? Well, there are various ways of doing it, but it's not straightforward. So when you are selecting a performance measure, you are doing one thing, but when it comes to measuring it, it's another story. So you have to make sure that you will be able to do both of them when you are doing it in actuality. Okay. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about, in some courses and in most of the courses, instead of the word performance measure, which is a general word, we're going to use the word objective function. Okay? So instead of performance measure, we will define objective functions. But objective functions are performance measures that are already described in a form which is measurable. Okay? So this is the way that you have to understand. So performance measure is more abstract, but if you define a performance measure, for example, talking about contribution or whatever we are going to have, then we are going to use the word objective function in different courses. So the objective function would already tell us on the way that we will be able to measure that as well. Okay? So when it comes to performance measure, this might be more abstract, but if you want to make it explicitly measurable, you define an objective function, which is a clear function of your decisions. And it is a standard thing that we utilize in different courses. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, I think it's time to look for this example that I was talking about yesterday. Okay, so let me distribute this in the classroom. And in the meantime, I will use the overhead projector for this. So, okay, so this was the example that I mentioned yesterday. It's already in your available at the website. Yesterday I didn't notice that it was available at the website. So, okay. Okay. So. Now, first of all, let's look at the case. Can I have a copy as well? Because I didn't I only let all the copies to be distributed. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Now, this is basically a description of a certain soft drink manufacturer and its distribution problem. Actually, this is one of the topics of the 4th year project course. It is not as it is described by the company to the students, but I played with certain parts a little bit so that we have a clearer picture of what's going on for our use. But this is one of the topics that was offered by the companies for the 4th year project several years ago. Okay? And every year we have about 30, 35 to 40 different topics offered by the companies for student projects in the 4th year. Okay, so I took one of them as an example. Now, what they have here is the following. The largest soft drink manufacturer and distributor in Turkey, it is basically Coca-Cola. Okay, it's CCI, Coca-Cola içecek, Coca-Cola drink, CCD. Okay, and it has a very large market share. So it sells about 12 brands and with about 150 different stock keeping units. What do we mean by stock keeping unit? By stock keeping unit, we mean different forms of the same product. For example, you might have a can of Coke or Diet Coke, and then you might have the plastic 1 liter, plastic 1.5 liter, plastic 2 liter. Each of those are called different SKUs, different stock keeping units, because you need to keep them in stock in different forms. You cannot keep the liquid in a grocery store. Okay, so you need to have different stock keeping units. So they have around 150 different stock keeping units, and they have 5 manufacturing plants with the annual capacity of 400 million units, means I think 400 million liters probably. Okay, and the way that they distributed from these 5 companies to all over Turkey is they use 500 different distributors. At the same time, they also distribute certain things in some very populated areas. For example, in Kızılay, they have an independent distributor, which is operated by Coca-Cola itself. Okay? So, well, it is already describing here. The company has 2 different sales channels, which are traditional and modern. Traditional sales channels include grocery stores, hotels, and schools, whereas modern sales channels include the national hypermarkets and local hypermarkets. So I was talking about the traditional sales channels, where they distribute actually to each restaurant, even to grocery store, by using its own brand. Now, with respect to the modern ones, it is basically distributed to the central warehouse of, let's say, Migros, or central warehouse of a large hypermarket, and then redistributed from there to other Migroses all around Ankara or İç Anadolu or so on and so forth from those hypermarkets. Now, there are several distributors in every city. Factories ship products to the nearest distributors, which supply these products to both traditional and modern channels. The company makes several campaigns for particular products being sold in modern sales channels for particular dates during the year. Because the bulk, when they sell it to Migros, they sell it in bulk, in very large quantities. So they have different campaigns that they do for large hypermarkets compared to the traditional sales channel. The campaign products in hypermarkets should meet the demand during the campaign process, of course. Now, the demand increases, and they have to make sure that they will be able to do that. However, especially in the Eastern Anatolia region, the company faces a problem that there are not enough products in the shelves during the campaign, which means that there is some kind of a problem with respect to shipping items from factories to the distributors in the eastern part of Turkey. Now, this is a challenging problem that contains efficiency and effectiveness issues. What are the possible performance measures you would use for this situation? Give 2 examples and describe how you are planning to measure each. So the last part is, of course, my addition. The project topic is to design a system where these type of problems would be less. And it will be, basically, it will, and they are going to change their planning structure accordingly. Okay. Now, the answers, I have some answers here in this slide. This is slide number 17, which is in your notes that we went over yesterday. Now, one thing that you can see, which is important, is that during the periods where the demand is quite high, the number of products that are met from stock becomes a very important measure. In other words, think about a certain supermarket. Okay? If there is a huge demand and if the shelves are empty, what will happen? Well, then you are going to lose customers. You are not only probably going to lose a customer for that day, but the loyalty of the customer for your product is going to be lost as well. So the cost associated with losing a customer is very high. You can expect long-term effects of that. Think about yourself, like you really like a certain product. You always go to a supermarket, but don't find that product once, twice, 3 times. Then what do? You probably change the product. Okay? So this is actually what they are observing. Especially at the times of campaigns where demand is expected to be high, then this might be a very good performance measure, if we can measure it, of course, that we might have in order to see the effectiveness of the current system and at the same time the future systems that we are going to build up. So number of products that are met from stock. Now, how are you going to measure that? Any ideas? So let's simplify the problem. Think about a supermarket. Okay? So you are spending your whole day in the supermarket. You have all the technological equipment you want. You can take it to video. You can use anything, any technological device you want. So how are you going to measure the number of products that are met or not met from stock? Any ideas? How do you do that? You think about yourself. So what do you do when you are looking for a certain product? You go to the shelf. You know the location more or less. You look for it. Maybe you're not shopping. Is somebody else shopping for you? Okay, what do you do? Okay. Well, you don't do anything, it seems, but what a normal person would do would be simply go to the shelf. If that product is not available, find somebody and ask. Okay? So if you ask, for example, where is my hair shampoo today? Where is that? I'm looking for this brand specifically. Okay? Or where is this type of bread? You ask the person. And the person says, we are out of it. So that is actually something that needs to be followed. So how are we going to measure that is not that simple, because anybody in the floor of the supermarket can be asked this question, or you might have shy people like you who will not ask but just leave the supermarket. Okay? And we're not sure whether you really want that product or not, because you never tell anybody what you are thinking. Okay? So, but still, some of you might really want that, and we lost you as customers that day. Okay? So this is something, this is a very good performance measure, but it's not that easy to measure it physically. But we have to find something, and actually, this is what we mean. So you put videos all around, watch the videos, then tell TÜBİTAK to approve your claims with respect to whether this customer really wanted it and couldn't find it, and they scientifically will tell you that it is correct. Okay, well, we don't know what they are correcting, but okay, so that's something that we can do. But this is a good performance measure, am I right, for the description? Now, another performance measure is we might have some customers asking, and at that point in time, you can say that, oh, we have it at the back. So wait here, and I'll bring it to you. Okay? But still, this is a little bit inconvenience. But at least it's better than the previous one. Am I right? This is called this is what we call backordered amount. So we let the customer wait there, and we promise that we are going to supply in a few minutes, in a few hours, or whatever. That's called backorder. Another thing to observe is the actual inventory level in the supermarket. That's another measure. And another measure would be the average time it takes to transport products to certain customers in the Eastern Anatolia. That might be a measure, because we don't know how they are transporting. They may not be transporting everything directly. So that might be something that we need to look for. Now, of course, measures like number of distributors, number of products sold in a hypermarket are not measures, because they are decisions. Okay? So you can say that decrease the number of products that are sold. Or increase that. But that's decision. That's not a performance measure. Okay? So those are the things that I would like you to differentiate, if possible, when we are talking about certain things. So my expectation is you should be able to differentiate between a decision and a performance measure in a certain case, of course. And moreover, to be able to measure that performance, it may not be that straightforward. I want you to think about that. Especially this part is pretty challenging, I should tell. But nevertheless, we are going to have some cases that we want to discuss. Questions? I'll see you in 10 minutes.